The world trembles under the weight of crowns. Torches burn in endless corridors, banners sway in stormy winds, and whispers echo in vaulted halls where power is both a gift and a curse. This is not a quiet tale of kings, but a storm of destiny, where every heartbeat is a drum of war, every glance a spark of betrayal, and every prayer a desperate plea to the heavens. What follows is the life of a king, not one king, but the eternal king, born again in every age, bound to glory, bound to ruin. Here are the moments that forged him. In the dim, echoing corridors of the castle, a boy grows not in the sunlit fields of innocence, but in the long, cold shadow of expectation. His world is one of stone, tapestry, and silence, a silence heavy with the weight of unspoken duties. Childhood is not a rite, but a brief, carefully managed prelude to a life that is not his own. His tutors, men with eyes like chips of granite and minds like ancient libraries, carve lessons into his memory as surely as masons carve sigils into the castle walls. He learns the genealogies of 100 noble houses before he learns the names of the constellations. He studies the art of war from sprawling maps while other boys are chasing frogs by the river. He learns that every gesture, from the way he holds a fork to the inclination of his head, may one day rule a realm, and so every movement must be measured, deliberate, and devoid of the spontaneous joy that marks a child's world. Honor and duty are not abstract words whispered by priests or read from scrolls. For the boy, they are chains of gold, gleaming and impossibly heavy. They are fastened around his soul from his first conscious thought. When he plays with wooden soldiers, his tutor is there to correct his flanking maneuvers. When he rides his pony, the master of horse speaks not of fun, but of posture, of commanding presence, of the way a king must appear to his men. Even in his games, the boy is reminded that he is more than a child. He is the vessel of a dynasty, the living embodiment of a legacy written in blood and iron. He is a promise made by his grandfather's conquests and a debt to be paid by his unborn great-grandsons. The laughter of the kitchen boys that drifts up from the courtyards sounds like a language from a foreign land, a dialect of freedom he will never learn to speak. His world is a small, crowded stage. Family, priests, and courtiers gather around him like wolves, cloaked as shepherds, their smiles soft, but their eyes sharp. Each whisper is a lesson in manipulation. His mother teaches him to read the hidden meanings in a lady's compliment. His uncle, the general, teaches him that mercy is a weapon, to be used sparingly and for maximum effect. The high priest teaches him that fear of the gods is the bedrock of order, and that he, the future king, is the instrument of that fear. They shape the boy who will one day wear the crown, sanding away his rough edges of personality, polishing him into a perfect, predictable icon of power. He learns to build walls within himself to keep his true thoughts hidden behind a placid mask of polite attention. The child is not his own. He belongs to history. And history is a relentless, unsentimental master. The dawn breaks not with the gentle song of birds, but with the solemn, resonant clang of the great bell from the citadel's central spire. Its iron tongue strikes the hour, and each peal is a hammer blow against the silence, a summons to the world of the living. The king awakens instantly, for his sleep is never deep. It is a shallow, watchful thing, a brief respite in a war that never ends. He awakens to rituals older than his ancestors, a precise and unchanging choreography that separates the man from the monarch. Before he even rises, the chamberlain of the bedchamber enters, followed by 3 senior servants, their movements silent and practiced. They do not speak unless spoken to. They wash his hands and face from a silver ewer and basin, the water scented with rosemary and mint, not for comfort, but for clarity. They believe it cleanses the mind for the day's judgments. It is a baptism, a daily purification, for a king must be cleansed before the day can bleed upon him. He feels the cold water on his skin and knows it is the first of 1,000 sensations he must endure, not enjoy. Next come the garments. They are laid out not as clothes, but as an arsenal. A valet presents the fine linen undertunic, another the silk doublet, a third the heavy velvet surcoat, its front emblazoned with the golden lion of his dynasty, each stitch a declaration of power. These garments are heavy with gold and silk, every thread a symbol, every jewel a chain of responsibility. The ermine-lined robe does not warm, it weighs. It settles on his shoulders like a physical manifestation of his kingdom, a constant, crushing pressure that straightens his spine and forces his chin up. As they dress him, he is no longer a man with tired eyes and an aching back. He is the realm made flesh. The transformation is absolute. Advisors already wait. He can hear the faint rustle of scrolls and the low murmur of their voices from the antechamber. There is no quiet moment for reflection, no gentle cup of wine by a window. Even as the sun spills its first golden light across the throne-room floor, so too does the burden of decisions that may save or damn a kingdom. He walks from his chambers, his personal guards falling into step behind him, their armor clinking in rhythm with his measured stride. The faces in the council room turn to him as he enters. The Lord Treasurer, his face a roadmap of worry over crop failures and tax revenues. The Grand Marshal, his jaw tight with news of skirmishes on the northern border. The Lord Chancellor, his hands filled with judicial appeals and disputes between powerful dukes. Their problems become his problems. Their world becomes his world. The sun has risen, and the king's slow daily sacrifice has begun. At the royal table, a meal is never just sustenance. It is a carefully orchestrated performance, a microcosm of the kingdom itself. Here, bread is power, offered first to the most favored guest as a sign of inclusion and trust. Wine is promise, the vintage and quality a direct reflection of the king's respect or disdain for those who share it. And the meat, carved with ceremonial precision by the high steward, bleeds with meaning, its richness a boast of the realm's prosperity, its very presence a reminder of the life and death authority vested in the crown. Every dish is a message, every course a paragraph in a silent, The great banquets unfold like negotiation. Grand theaters of politics. Ambassadors from rival kingdoms, powerful dukes with private armies, and sly merchant princes gather under the pretense of celebration. But beneath the laughter, the music of lutes, and the warm glow of 1,000 candles lies the cold, relentless grind of ambition. Each toast is a potential dagger, its words laden with double meanings that must be instantly deciphered and parried. Each smile is a mask, hiding calculations of profit and loss, of weakness and opportunity. The king, seated at the high table, must be the master of this theater. He must appear jovial yet commanding, generous yet shrewd, his eyes missing nothing, his mind racing 3 moves ahead in a dozen different games at once. Etiquette becomes a battlefield of gestures. A king's failure to offer his own cup to a visiting dignitary can be interpreted as a grave insult, sparking a border war. The seating arrangement is a map of the current political landscape, with proximity to the king being the ultimate measure of influence. A single glance can seal an alliance or condemn a courtier to obscurity. The king learns to speak this silent language as his native tongue. He orchestrates the evening, guiding conversations, diffusing tensions with a well-timed jest, and asserting his dominance with a subtle, chilling look. The table may be laden with the finest foods and wines, a spectacle of immense wealth. But for those who truly understand the game, it is the sharpest, most dangerous place in the kingdom. A king's heart is not his own. It is a state asset, a bargaining chip in the unforgiving calculus of international diplomacy. Love is a luxury afforded to poets and peasants, not to the man who wears the crown. His marriage is not a union of souls, but a merger of territories, a treaty written not in vows but in clauses concerning dowries, trade routes, and military alliances. He first meets his queen as a name on a genealogical chart, a portrait sent by courier, a political necessity. The wedding is a magnificent state affair, sealed with the ink of scribes and the blood of dynastic ambition. He stands at the altar beside a stranger, binding his life to hers for the good of the realm, two lonely pillars expected to support an entire kingdom. And yet, behind the heavy curtain of politics, the man still lives. Passion, that untamable, irrational force, claws at the king. It finds him in the quiet moments, in the dead of night, when the weight of the crown is momentarily set aside. Secret affairs and whispered trysts in hidden gardens become his only true domain, the one place where he is not a symbol, but a man of flesh and blood, burning with human desire. These stolen moments are a dangerous rebellion, a treason against his own office, a misplaced glove, a lingering scent of perfume, a single knowing glance intercepted by the wrong courtier. Any of it could unravel the carefully woven tapestry of his reign. But the risk itself is part of the allure, a taste of the freedom he can never truly possess. Queens and consorts are never mere ornaments. The wise king knows this. His queen, the woman chosen for him by councils and treaties, is often his most vital anchor, his most trusted advisor, and sometimes his most formidable rival. She is not just the mother of his heir. She is a political entity in her own right, with her own network of loyalties, her own ambitions, her own sharp intellect. She may be a partner in his rule, her counsel shaping his decisions in the quiet of the royal bedchamber. Or she may be a player in her own game, wielding her influence like a blade, advancing the cause of her own family, her own faction. The relationship between king and queen is the central axis around which the court revolves. A complex dance of duty, respect, suspicion, and, on the rarest of occasions, a quiet, resilient affection that grows in the stony soil of their shared prison. The brassy call of trumpets shatters the pre-dawn stillness, a sound that rips through the misty air and settles deep in the bones. The king, encased in the cold, articulated steel of his armor, rides with his banners. The silk standards, heavy with rain and morning dew, snap and crackle in the wind, each one a history of his house written in thread and dye. For him, war is not a choice. It is the crown's most solemn inheritance. It is recurring fever in the blood of his dynasty, a violent cyclical obligation passed down from his conquering grandfather to his untested son. He does not choose the battlefield any more than he chooses the color of his eyes. It is his birthright and his curse. On the parchment of maps in his command tent, strategy is a clean and elegant thing, a game of lines, arrows, and calculated risks. But the reality is written in the mud and blood of the field. The king knows that his commands, spoken in the sterile environment of the tent, will translate into the screams of men and the stench of death. He has studied the great captains of history, he knows the theories of siegecraft and cavalry charges, but he also knows that no plan survives contact with the chaos of battle. From his command, thousands of men, farmers, blacksmiths, and stonemasons, all now soldiers, will march toward what they hope is glory, but what will be, for so many, an anonymous grave in foreign soil. The weight of every single life rests upon his shoulders, a burden far heavier than his steel plate. When the moment of crisis arrives, when the line falters and fear begins to spread like a contagion, the king rides to the front. He pushes his war horse through the ranks of his weary men, his helmet under his arm so they can see his face. In that moment, the army does not see a mere man, a mortal creature of flesh and fear. They see destiny in armor. They see the living embodiment of the kingdom, the divine right to rule made manifest. His presence is a talisman, his voice a clarion call that cut through the din of battle. He is no longer just a strategist. He is a symbol, a legend in the making. And in the thunder of hooves, the clash of steel, and the desperate, defiant war cries of his soldiers, the story of his reign is truly written. The royal hunt is more than sport. It is a rehearsal for war, a ritualized display of the very aggression that underpins the throne. When the horns sound and the hounds are released, the forest transforms into a battlefield. The king and his nobles, mounted on powerful steeds, do not see the beauty of the woods. They see terrain to be conquered, obstacles to be overcome. The chase is a cavalry charge in miniature, a test of nerve, horsemanship, and strategy. Every arrow loosed is practice for survival. Every cornered beast a stand-in for a real enemy. The kill itself is a public affirmation of the king's power, his right to take life, his mastery over the natural world. It is a raw, primal ceremony, reminding all who witness it that their ruler is not just a lawmaker, but a predator. Tournaments dazzle the common folk with a kaleidoscope of steel and splendor. Pennants of 100 colors flutter from the viewing stands. The sun glints off polished armor as knights, the heroes of the age, thunder across the tilt yard. The crowd cheers the spectacle, the splintering of lances, the clash of swords. But behind the chivalric pageantry lies a brutal truth. Every knight who competes does so not merely for the purse of gold or the favor of a lady, but for the calculating gaze of the king. The tournament is a marketplace of martial talent. A knight who distinguishes himself may win a captaincy in the royal army or a title to land. A knight who fails may face ridicule and ruin. For the king, it is a convenient way to assess the strength and ambition of his vassals, turning their pride and aggression against each other in a controlled environment, all while providing a thrilling distraction for his subjects. At night, when the violence of the day is done, a fragile beauty is permitted within the castle walls. Music and poetry echo in the great hall, the delicate notes of a harp or the resonant voice of a bard offering a brief respite from the harsh realities of power. These are fleeting moments of grace within walls built on conquest and maintained by force. The king might sit by the fire, his head tilted, listening to a tale of ancient heroes or a song of tragic love. For a few precious hours, the weight of his office might seem to lift, but even here, he is not truly at rest. The beauty is a reminder of all that is vulnerable, all that his crown must protect, and all that his wars might destroy. It is a beautiful, fragile cage. Justice is demanded, and the king must become the judge. He sits for hours upon the throne, a cold and unforgiving seat of power, listening to the endless petitions of his people. A farmer accuses a neighbor of moving a boundary stone. A merchant claims a guild has cheated him. Two powerful barons dispute a claim to a fertile valley. The king must listen, his face a mask of impassive wisdom, and deliver a verdict. He is the final arbiter, the living law. Each decision is a stone, carefully placed, adding to the towering, precarious legacy of his reign. A just ruling earns the respect of the commons, but may anger a powerful lord. A pragmatic ruling that favors the mighty preserves stability, but plants seeds of resentment. He learns that justice is rarely pure. It is an alloy, mixed with politics, power, and the grim necessity of keeping the realm from fracturing. Gold, the lifeblood of the kingdom, flows into the royal coffers. The Lord Treasurer presents his ledgers, detailing the revenues from taxes, tariffs, and tithes. The king sees the numbers, the cold, hard figures that fund his army, build his castles, and pay for the splendor of his court. But he knows that every coin carries the sweat and toil of his subjects. To levy a tax is to bleed the realm slowly and carefully so as not to kill the host. He must balance the needs of the state against the suffering of the peasantry. He authorizes the collection of funds for a new war or a grand project, knowing that somewhere a family will have to sell their only ox, a child will go hungry. It is a terrible, necessary arithmetic, and the calculations leave his soul cold. Diplomacy is war by candlelight. In the hushed quiet of the council chamber, long after the court has gone to sleep, the real battles for the future of the kingdom are fought. Envoys and ambassadors meet, their words the primary weapons, their silences the strongest shields. The king must master this subtle combat. He negotiates with smiles as sharp as swords and pleasantries as heavily armored as a knight. He learns to lie with a straight face, to make promises he can reinterpret later, to sense the weakness behind a rival's blustering threats. A misplaced word, a flicker of emotion in his eyes, could betray his position and cost him a province. It is a draining, nerve-wracking form of warfare, fought not for yards of bloody ground, but for the clauses of a treaty that will shape the lives of generations. Before a great battle, after the maps have been studied and the orders given, the king retreats from the world of men. He kneels alone in the cold silence of his campaign chapel, the air thick with the scent of old incense and beeswax. His armor is off, his head is bowed. He prays not only to the one God of the priest, but to a whole pantheon of lesser powers. He prays to the ancient saints of his house, to the patron of soldiers, to any spirit or deity that might lend him favor. He touches the fragments of bone in his personal reliquary, whispering pleas for victory, for survival. In the face of utter uncertainty, reason is not enough. The king, who holds the lives of thousands in his hands, bows to superstition, seeking aid from the unseen world. His world is mapped by more than surveyors and cartographers, astrologers, men with ink-stained fingers and eyes that seem to see beyond the veil, trace his destiny in the celestial movements of the stars. They present him with complex charts, whispering of auspicious days for war and ill-fated moments for signing treaties. Sorcerers and wise women are brought to the castle through secret doors, their purpose to whisper charms against betrayal, to brew potions to ward off poison, to read the future in smoke or shadow. The king may not fully believe in their power, but in a world rife with assassins and plots, he cannot afford to dismiss any potential advantage. Even the crown, the ultimate symbol of earthly power, bows to the fear of the unknown. The coronation is the ultimate fusion of theater and sacrament. It is a grand public ritual designed to awe the masses and legitimize his rule. Dressed in robes of white and gold, he is anointed with holy oil, the scent clinging to him for days, marking him as something other than a normal man. The archbishop, the voice of God on earth, places the heavy crown upon his head, a physical act that binds his mortal flesh to a divine duty. In that moment, surrounded by the highest lords and ladies of the realm, under the gaze of heaven, he ceases to be merely a man. He becomes a symbol, an institution, a sacred vessel for the sovereignty of the nation. The ritual is a powerful piece of statecraft, a story told to the world that his power comes not from the sword alone, but from a higher, unassailable authority. Whispers slither through the castle corridors like venomous snakes. They are the true language of the court, a constant sibilant undercurrent beneath the veneer of polite society. Intrigue is the real currency of power, traded in shadowy alcoves and behind ornate tapestries. Plots are hatched, reputations are destroyed, and alliances are shattered not by grand proclamations, but by a single, well-placed rumor. The king learns to listen to the silence, to watch the way people don't look at each other. He knows that daggers, both literal and metaphorical, gleam brighter in the shadows than they ever do in the sunlight of the throne room. In this venomous environment, trust is a fool's luxury. The king trusts none fully, for the history of his own family is a litany of betrayal. His most loyal general could be tempted by a promise of the throne. His charming cousin could be plotting to replace him. The woman who shares his bed could be a spy for a rival faction. Every friend may be a traitor in waiting. Every ally is bound to him only by self-interest. And so, fear becomes his closest, most constant companion. It sits with him at the banquet table, prompting him to watch the servant pouring his wine. It lies with him in bed, making him start at every creak of the floorboards. It is a cold, familiar presence, the shadow cast by his own crown. He is surrounded by people day and night, yet he is utterly alone. Alone in the gilded chambers, after the courtiers have bowed and departed, the king feels the immense, crushing weight of his solitude. There is no one to whom he can confess his doubts, no one with whom he can share the true burden of his fears. To be sovereign is to be sealed within oneself, to be irrevocably and absolutely alone. He is the pinnacle of the pyramid, and the peak is a lonely, wind-swept place. He wanders the castle at night, a ghost in his own home, touching the cold stone, gazing at the portraits of his ancestors, and wondering if they, too, felt this profound, soul-deep isolation. The body weakens, though the crown does not. The king, who once led cavalry charges and stood for days in full armor, now struggles to rise from his chair. His hands, which once held the reins of a war horse with an iron grip, now tremble as they lift a goblet to his lips. Wrinkles have carved deeper lines into his face than any enemy's sword. Sickness, that patient, indiscriminate conqueror, lays siege to the fortress of his body, and it is a battle he cannot win. His physicians, with their useless potions and whispered platitudes, cannot hold back the tide. He feels his strength ebbing away, a slow, humiliating defeat at the hands of his own mortality. The future of the realm becomes an obsession, a ghost that haunts his every waking thought. The succession, once an abstract political concept, is now a desperate, urgent reality. He looks at his heir, the son he has raised to be his replacement, and sees not a finished product, but a vessel of terrifying uncertainty. He has tried to shape him, to pour his own wisdom and experience into the boy, yet he knows that destiny cannot be forged by will alone. Will his son be strong enough to hold the loyalty of the ambitious barons? Will he be wise enough to navigate the treacherous currents of diplomacy? The king's greatest fear is not his own death, but the thought that the kingdom he spent his life preserving will shatter in weaker hands. His own mortality. At last, the final battle is lost. In the quiet of his bedchamber, surrounded by the hushed figures of his family and the highest priests, the king lays down not only his crown, but his final breath. The great bell of the citadel, which once announced his morning rituals, now tolls a slow, solemn rhythm for his passing. The crown is lifted from his bedside table and carried away to await his successor. The man is gone. What remains is not flesh and bone, but legend, his life, with all its triumphs, its brutalities, its sacrifices, and its secrets, is now woven into the endless, bloody, and magnificent tapestry of kings. His story becomes a lesson, a warning, and a myth for the ages to come.